fantasy playoffs begin in week 14 for most. In a lot of leagues, you can't make changes once you hit that point. So this is your last week to shore up your lineup. Hey, how are you? Jason Horwitz with you on the Chase Fantasy Football Series, exclusively here on CBS Sportsline. This is Roster Trends, the moves being made and the ones that should be made on your roster. And for that, we bring in CBS Sportsline senior fantasy writer Dave Richard from Miami. And Dave, one of the things people need help with right now is at the quarterback position. And your first article this week dealt with that very issue. Let's take a look at some quarterbacks that have been very inconsistent this season so far. You see Eli Manning, Rex Grossman, Brett Favre, and Ben Roethlisberger. Of those four, who is the most reliable and who is the least reliable for a team heading to the fantasy playoffs?
We talked a little bit about it on Tuesday, Jason. It's Brett Favre is the most reliable, despite the fact that he's old and everything else. He's got the best schedule of everybody that you mentioned. He's going to be gunning for Dan Marino's record, so you've got to expect him to throw another 10 touchdowns this season. And listen, Rex Grossman is still good when the matchup is right. Actually, that's true for everybody here except Eli Manning, who just looks like he's in a funk, doesn't have the confidence he used to have. It's all seemed to change for me when he lost Luke Pettigrew. That's his left tackle. Pettigrew isn't necessarily out for the season. He's got a broken leg. I don't know if they expect to get him back, but he hasn't been placed on injured reserve. Manning is a quarterback that I would try to stay away from in fantasy play.
Yeah, and Manning really needs Plaxico Burress to help him out as well, which you may or may not get either. All right, what about two others that have had good points and bad this season? Steve McNair, good of late, but just two big games really the last 7 weeks. Jake Delhomme, he's had good weeks, but in the last 4 games, just 4 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He just has one 200-yard game. Now, the two are 15th and 16th among quarterbacks, obviously with 12 teams that pass the top 12. Can you count on either of those guys?
Well, you would think that Delhomme would be great because he's got Steve Smith, he's got Keyshawn Johnson. That's exactly what you'd want your fantasy quarterback to have. But for whatever reason, he's just not connecting with these guys. Washington did a great job defending Steve Smith. They actually went man on Smith in Week 12. It was very surprising, but you know, Delhomme's just one of those guys, play the matchup, hope he gets around 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not what you really wanted to get from him. Delhomme's a 300-yard guy until this season came along, and now he just can't do it. He's had one 300-yard game this year.
Yeah, that Panthers offense really hasn't been explosive at all this season,
Yeah.
Dave. Let's stay with quarterbacks, and we'll go with one that was changed. Jay Cutler named the starter in Denver. Now, you can pick him up if you have an open spot and see what happens, at least for most fantasy people. But I think of more interest here for this season is what will he mean for the rest of the Broncos, and that fits perfectly into our email section. Joe from Santa Barbara writes, in regards to Jay Cutler, I have Javon Walker at wide receiver along with Lavernius Coles, Steve Smith, TJ Hushmanzada, and Devery Henderson. I'm thinking of sitting Walker this week because Jay Cutler hasn't proven himself. What are your thoughts? My initial thought here, Dave, was how does he have all those receivers? Then my thought was, all right, let's go to Dave for the question.
All right, let's pretend we're Mike Shanahan for a second, and we're in charge of this awesome offense in Denver that's supposed to take us to the Super Bowl. Now, we're taking a veteran quarterback who's been good for us but hasn't been great for us, and we're replacing him with a rookie. The expectations are going to be what? For him to be better than the quarterback that was there.
Very true.
Cutler's got a great arm, very good on the run. He can throw well on the run, and he's not afraid to put the ball in into a tight situation. So I think Cutler's a guy that's got a shot at getting 250 yards as soon as this week against Seattle. If you can get him in your league, go for it. Even if he busts in 2 weeks, you can drop him, pick up somebody else just to have him, so in case he blows up like I think he's gonna, he's on your team and he's not playing against you in the playoffs. So I like Cutler a lot. I think you should start Javon Walker every week too.
And Javon Walker is their deep threat, and one of the throws that a lot of young quarterbacks make early is that long ball, so Javon Walker would help out there. Dave, let's make one more addition here of the roster trends, the last roster trends before the playoffs. Your do's and don'ts, your advice for people to follow for this coming week. What are your do's and don'ts, Dave?
Well, first and foremost, you've got to consider the real-life NFL backups instead of fantasy backups. And what we're talking about here is, let's say you've got LaDainian Tomlinson and he goes down. A fantasy backup for LaDainian Tomlinson might be somebody like Julius Jones, who really has fallen down the fantasy ranks. Now you can get Michael Turner, and that would be the guy. So get the good backups to your best players. That's at running back and quarterback. Anybody riding the bench on your team and getting you 4 or 5 fantasy points a week, get rid of them. Get those insurance policies on your team. And last but not least, plan ahead if you're platooning at a certain position. A lot of people use the waiver wire to pick their kicker every week or their defense every week. Look ahead a little bit. Study the matchup some for the playoffs and get those kickers now that are going to help you win your championship.
And that definitely also means you have to know your league system, because if you're not allowed to make any additions once the playoffs start, you're in trouble if you're doing the waiver wire ticker.
Look at you, Jason. You are on top of things.
Helping you out there, Dave. All right, thanks a lot, man. I'm sure everyone will put that advice to good use starting today. All right, Dave, we'll talk to you real soon.
You got it, bro.
All right, folks, that'll do it for this edition of Roster Trends. But don't forget, Thursday night game between the Ravens and Bengals. You got to set your lineups early. Stardom Sit 'em comes your way beginning Wednesday, November 29th. Until then, I'm Jason Horowitz. Take care.